of ritualistic child abuse.
Witchcraft. They would sacrifice animals.
Does it make you want to hate murder, or does it make you want to do murder?
Let's explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time. Welcome back to Rogue Darkness, the podcast that uncovers how the misinterpretations and misinformation surrounding witchcraft, the occult, and other beliefs have led many to do unthinkable crimes. From ritualistic killings and the demons that live in all of us, to exploration of the macabre and delving deep into the unknown. Let's explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time. I'm your host of the Grim and Gruesome, Raven. Let's go rogue and get right into today's chilling crime. The horrifying discovery of Soka, also known as the Ibadan Forest of Horror in Nigeria. So let's start off from the very beginning. It all started when people started missing. In 2014, motorcycle taxi drivers in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria, began missing at an alarming rate and without a trace. Suspicions ran high, and the families of the missing began to grow increasingly worried, especially since the use of magic for evil is still prominent in some parts of the country. Rumors and assumptions of occultists kidnapping civilians for ritualistic sacrifice began to swarm all throughout Ibadan, leaving everyone scared for their loved ones and their own safety. Despite any physical proof of foul play or abductions taking place, there had been mysterious strangers lurking around the area at the time of the missing reports, which all the more caused rumors to spread. The notion of ritualistic killings was not far-fetched in Nigeria, because many times unfortunate acts of violence and murder had taken place there, with bodies turning up mutilated, disemboweled, and left in horrific states that indicated they were for sinister, ritualistic purposes. It wasn't until March 22, 2014, when a motorcyclist riding along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway passed by a wooded area known as Soka Forest. The motorcyclist claimed to have heard someone crying from within the trees, and upon hearing this, immediately notified the authorities. The local police went out to Soka Forest to investigate the claim, and what they found was pure nightmare fuel. While searching the grounds of the forest, the police first discovered an old, dilapidated, and presumably abandoned building, tucked away amongst the trees in the forest. There was reportedly a putrid stench emanating from within the building. This caused many red flags to go up, so the police decided to trek a little deeper and see what was causing the horrific smell. Entering the building, the authorities were immediately hit with one of the most horrific sights they had ever seen. Several decomposed bodies were within the building, bound with chains to prevent their escape. Despite the initial sight, the police continued on their search within the building, but it was only bound to get much worse. Human remains were scattered throughout the building. The deceased corpses had been reportedly butchered on butcher blocks, with some of the remains still chained to the slabs. Alongside the slew of decomposing bodies, there was also an area that housed mass amounts of personal belongings, presumed to be those of the victims. Items such as wallets, jewelry, shoes, clothing, children's toys, and identification such as driver's licenses and passports. Searching the grounds led the authorities to make the grim discovery that the corpses and remains were not only found within the building. It was reported that the human remains were scattered throughout the forest itself, hidden in bushes, stowed away in tree trunks, and some even discovered in holes in the ground or within caves. The remains were reportedly all found at different stages of decomposition, indicating that they had all been abducted and killed at different times. Most of the bodies found were missing limbs, internal organs, and some even their heads, which all the more led to the notion of ritualistic sacrifice. It was reported that upon investigating the forest, over 20 deceased victims' bodies were uncovered. There was also reportedly hundreds of human skulls discovered as well. Even more shocking was when the authorities on the scene came across some captives who were still alive. The captives were reported to be extremely malnourished and emaciated, practically skin and bones, still chained with clouds of flies encompassing them. When rescued by the authorities and brought in for treatment and eventual questioning regarding what they had experienced, the captives stated they had all been kidnapped, tortured, and kept in chains with just once-a-week feedings. Most of the victims said they couldn't remember what their captors looked like, but some recollected that they appeared as government officials. Whether or not the abductors were actually government officials, or just posing as one, is still a mystery. Many of the victims rescued from the forest stated that they had been beaten and left chained, living in complete squalor for several months on end. The forest was quickly blocked off by authorities so they could investigate the grounds more thoroughly and try to get to the bottom of who the perpetrators were and why they were doing what they were doing. Throughout the investigation, it was reported that many of the bodies discovered on the grounds could not be identified due to how badly they had been mutilated, or by the stage of decomposition they were in when found. Although authorities were doing their best, when the locals caught wind that some of the bodies could not be identified, they became outraged, since many had missing loved ones they were trying to find, and the fear that their loved ones could have been one of the victims was not only heartbreaking, but terrifying. The terror from the horrific discovery caused rumors of ritual killings to spread like crazy, many believing the killings had been ordered by affluent Nigerians in high positions of power in order for them to harness supernatural powers. According to an article from MysteriousUniverse.org, the author Brent Swancer wrote, "In the days after the discovery of what was being now called the Ibadan Forest of Horrors, crowds of rioters angry at a lack of anything being done, seeking answers to the identity of the victims, and some even convinced that more people were trapped underground, converged on the scene, brandishing guns, clubs, machetes, and bows and arrows, to the point that the police were forced to disperse them with tear gas." The authorities would later make numerous arrests in connection with the grim discoveries at the Soka forest, including the questioning and ultimate arrest of some suspects who were policemen and security guards. Unfortunately, to this day, no one has ultimately been charged with the murders, and the case is still open and ongoing. So that was the horrifying case of the discovery and uncovering of the Ibadan Forest of Horrors. Let me know your thoughts on this case, and if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to contact me at roguedarknesspod@gmail.com. You can also DM me on Instagram at rogue_darkness. I'd love to hear your thoughts on cases I've covered, as well as hear any suggestions you may have for future ones you might like to hear. And all the links to the articles referenced in this episode, as well as my socials and contact information, are all down below for your reference. If you like what you hear on Rogue Darkness, please consider sharing the podcast with your family and friends, and also by leaving a rating and review on Apple iTunes, or wherever else you can leave a review. It's a great way to help the show out and to get it more noticed. And as I've mentioned previously, I do have a Ko-fi page, so if you ever want to check it out, the link is down below in the description for reference. Any support to it is always greatly appreciated, but it's never expected. And with that said, that concludes this week's episode of Rogue Darkness. The darkness is all around us, and I can confidently say that reality truly is more terrifying than fiction. Until next time.